The chamber was massive, stretching nearly a kilometer in diameter. Thousands of species filled the seats, their bodies in forms as varied as the stars themselves. Some breathed methane, others lived in water tanks, and a few existed as pure energy contained in crystalline shells. But they all had one thing in common. They all believed they were superior to the humans. Dayan stood at the human podium, his black suit crisp and formal. He had represented Earth for 12 years now, longer than any human before him. His hair was graying at the temples, and the lines around his eyes showed the weight of endless negotiations. Behind him stood Hana, the military liaison, her uniform decorated with medals from conflicts across 3 spiral arms. She kept her hands clasped behind her back, but her jaw was tight. The vote had just finished. The holographic display showed the results in glowing numbers that everyone could see. 2,347 votes against humanity. Only 12 votes in favor. Earth's proposal for mining rights in the outer spiral had been crushed. Vothrak rose from the council chair. He was of Rex, tall and covered in blue-gray scales that shimmered under the chamber lights. His 4 eyes swept across the assembly with satisfaction. When he spoke, his voice boomed through translation devices that made his words understandable to every species present. The council has spoken. The territories claimed by humanity in the outer spiral are hereby transferred to the Vrex Empire. Humanity's claim is rejected on the grounds of insufficient maturity and emotional instability. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Some species clicked their mandibles in approval. Others flashed bioluminescent patterns that signaled satisfaction. Dayan felt Hana shift behind him. He knew what she was thinking. Humanity had discovered those territories. Human ships had mapped them. Human scientists had confirmed the resource deposits. And human soldiers had driven off the pirates that once nested there. All of that work, all of that sacrifice. And now the council was simply giving it away. But it got worse. Vothrak continued. Furthermore, the council has reviewed humanity's status. After careful consideration, we have determined that humanity requires additional time to mature before they can participate fully in galactic governance. Effective immediately, humanity is placed on probationary status for the next 100 years. The chamber went silent. Even the species that had voted against humanity seemed surprised by this announcement. During this probationary period, Bothrock said, humanity will lose voting rights in council matters. All technology, research, and military assets contributed by humanity to the council will be considered council property. Humanity may continue to observe council sessions, but they will not participate in decisions. Dayan stood very still. 100 years. They were stripping away everything humanity had built over nearly 9 decades of membership. A medical research that had saved billions of lives. The defensive technologies that protected the borders. The diplomatic solutions that had prevented countless wars. All of it taken away with a single vote. Hana leaned forward and whispered, Ambassador, we need to respond. Dayan nodded slowly. He looked around the chamber, studying the faces and forms of the species that had once called humanity their allies. The Tholians, whose entire civilization humanity had saved from an asteroid impact. The Kelrith, whose civil war had ended because of Dion's mediation. The Pyran Collective, whose economy had been rebuilt with human financial aid. They had all voted against humanity. Every single one. He thought about the human colonies scattered across dozens of star systems. He thought about the children being born on distant worlds who would grow up being told they were inferior. He thought about the human scientists whose discoveries would be credited to others. He thought about the human soldiers who had died protecting council borders, their names forgotten. And he made his decision. Dayan activated his podium's microphone. The sound cut through the murmurs and conversations in the chamber. Thousands of beings turned to look at him. "I have a statement," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. It was the same tone he used when negotiating peace treaties. Vothrak looked annoyed. "The matter is concluded, Ambassador. There is no need for humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately." The chamber erupted. Some species gasped. Others made sounds of confusion or shock. A few began shouting questions in languages that overwhelmed the translation system. Vothrak slammed his hand against the council chair's console, creating a booming sound that echoed through the chamber. "You cannot simply withdraw. There are procedures, requirements, and Article 7, Section 3 of the Council Charter," Dayan said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Any member species may withdraw from the Council at any time for any reason. No justification is required. No vote is necessary. It is an unconditional right." He paused and looked directly at Vothrak. "We are exercising that right." A Tholian delegate rose from his seat, his crystalline body flickering with agitation. "This is madness. You need the Council. Your species is too young to survive alone in this galaxy." Dayan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We survived before we joined the Council. We explored space before we met you. We built our civilization before we knew you existed. I think we will manage." Another delegate stood, this one a Kellerth with bronze feathers. "Ambassador Dayan, please reconsider. Perhaps we were too harsh." "We can discuss." "There is nothing to discuss," Dayan said. He began gathering his documents, placing them carefully in his case. "Humanity came to this council in good faith. We contributed everything we had. We gave our technology freely. We shed our blood defending council borders. We shared our knowledge without reservation." He closed his case with a soft click. "And in return, you have declared us inferior. You have stolen our territories. You have taken our achievements and claimed them as your own. You have stripped us of our voice." Dayan turned and began walking toward the exit. Hannah fell in step beside him, her boots clicking against the polished floor. Vothrak called out, "You will regret this, human. Without the Council's protection, your species will be vulnerable. Without our trade networks, your economy will collapse. Without our knowledge, you will fall behind." Dayan stopped at the chamber's massive doorway. He turned back one last time to look at the Council. "Perhaps you will discover exactly how much you depended on us." Then he left. Hannah followed him through the door, and it sealed behind them with a sound like thunder. Behind them, the Galactic Council erupted into chaos. Species shouted at each other. Accusations flew across the chamber. Some demanded they pursue the humans and force them to stay. Others insisted it was good riddance. But a few, a very few, sat quietly in their seats and wondered what they had just done. Outside the chamber, Dayan and Hannah walked through the corridors of the council station in silence. Other humans they passed looked at them with questions in their eyes, but neither spoke until they reached their ship dock once inside. Hannah finally asked, "What now?" Dayan sat down heavily in the captain's chair. He suddenly looked very tired. Now we go home. And we tell humanity that we are done begging for respect." The ship's engines hummed to life. Within minutes, they were breaking away from the council station, heading back toward human space. Behind them, the council would soon discover what it meant to lose humanity, and they would pay a price none of them could imagine. 6 months had passed since Dayan walked out of the council chamber. Earth had not been idle during that time. Admiral Yong stood on the bridge of the Tassi Vigilance, watching through the view screen as another transport ship filled with human personnel departed from the council's central medical facility. He was a tall man with silver hair cut military short, and his face rarely showed emotion. But today there was satisfaction in his eyes. "That is the last of our doctors from this facility," his first officer reported. All human medical staff have been evacuated. Good, Young said. Move to the next station on the list. The withdrawal was systematic. Every human scientist, engineer, doctor, teacher, and soldier was being pulled back to human space. It had taken months of careful planning, but the operation was going exactly as designed. No one was left behind. No one was forgotten. On the medical facility they had just left, alien doctors were beginning to discover a problem. The equipment did not work properly without the humans. Oh, the basic functions still operated, beds still adjusted, lights still turned on. But the advanced diagnostic machines, the surgical robots, the quantum analyzers that could detect diseases at the molecular level, all of them were failing. One Tholian doctor tried to run a neural scan on a patient and found the machine completely unresponsive. He called for a technician. The technician tried every command he knew, but the machine would not respond. It took them 6 hours to realize the truth. The machine's core operating system had been remotely deactivated. Dr. Minji was responsible for much of that deactivation. She sat in a small office aboard a transport ship, her fingers dancing across a holographic keyboard. She was young for such an important position, only 34, but she had been the head of xenobiology research for the Council for 8 years. Around her, packing crates held decades of research. Tissue samples from 1,000 species. Genetic sequences that had taken years to map. Treatment protocols for diseases that had once been considered incurable. All of it was going back to human space. Her assistant, a younger researcher named Quan, entered the office. Doctor, we are receiving messages from the Antares sector. The plague has returned. Minji did not look up from her keyboard. I know. They are asking for your research. They say the situation is critical. I am sure it is. Quan hesitated. Doctor, you are close to finishing the cure. People are dying. Minji's fingers stopped moving. She looked up at her assistant, and her eyes were hard. Do you remember what they said when I requested additional funding for the Antares research? Do you remember what the council told me? Quan nodded slowly. They said human concerns were not a priority. They said my research was wasting council resources on a disease that primarily affected human colonies, Minji corrected. They cut my funding by 70%. I had to beg for supplies. I had to fight for every sample, every test, every analysis. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. I continued the research anyway. I worked 16-hour days. I used my own money to buy equipment. And I found the cure. I was 98% complete. So why not give it to them? Quan asked quietly. Minji turned back to him. Because the Antares plague has mutated. It no longer affects humans. But it does affect Tholians, Kellerith, and Vrex. Interesting, is it not? When it threatened only humans, it was not worth council resources. Now that it threatens council species, suddenly it is a crisis. She walked back to her desk and resumed typing. They will have to solve it themselves, just as they expected us to solve it ourselves. Across the galaxy, Captain Seok was overseeing a different kind of withdrawal. His fleet, the 7th Human Defense Fleet, had been stationed in the neutral zones for 32 years. They had fought off raiders, pirates, and slavers. They had protected council borders and kept trade routes safe. Now they were leaving. His ship, the Tay's Defender, hung in space near a border station. Around him, 73 other human ships were forming up for the journey home. The station below was panicking. Captain, we are receiving another transmission from Station Commander Vrelthas, his communications officer reported. Put him through, Seok said. The view screen flickered to life, showing a Vrex in an ornate uniform. His scales were pale with stress. Captain Seok, please. You cannot leave. The Krell raiders will attack within days. Without your fleet, we have no defense. Seok kept his expression neutral. Station Commander, the Council has placed humanity on probationary status. We are no longer permitted to participate in Council defense operations. That was a political decision. This is about survival. Then perhaps the Council should have considered survival before making political decisions, Seok replied. He nodded to his communications officer to cut the transmission. Within hours, his fleet was gone. Behind them, the border station sent desperate messages to Council headquarters, begging for protection. But the Council's own defense fleet was scattered across hundreds of systems, stretched thin and poorly coordinated. Without human tactical support, they had no idea how to effectively patrol the borders. The Krell raiders attacked 3 days later. The station fell in less than an hour. Back on Earth, President Sora stood before the Global Assembly. She was a small woman with gray hair and gentle eyes, but when she spoke, the world listened. Around the assembly chamber, representatives from every human nation and colony watched her carefully. 6 months ago, the Galactic Council rejected us, she said. They called us too young, too emotional, too unstable. They took our territories. They took our voice. They took our contributions and claimed them as their own. She paused, letting her words sink in. Some of you asked if we should fight this decision. Some of you wanted to challenge them, to force them to recognize our worth. Sora shook her head. But we do not need their recognition. We do not need their approval. We do not need them at all. A holographic display activated behind her, showing a star map. Human space was highlighted in blue, a collection of systems that had grown steadily over the decades. But now, new systems were being added. Territories that humans had explored but never claimed. Worlds that humans had discovered but never colonized. We are reclaiming what is ours, Sora continued. We are expanding our own space. We are building our own trade networks. We are investing in our own people. Everything we gave to the Council, all that technology and knowledge and effort, is now being used for humanity's benefit alone. The assembly erupted in applause. It was not angry or vengeful. It was determined. Over the following months, humanity transformed. Resources that had been spread across Council space were consolidated. Scientists who had been working on Council projects returned to human universities and research centers. Soldiers who had been defending alien borders came home to protect human colonies. The economy boomed. Without the drain of Council obligations, human worlds flourished. New colonies were established. New technologies were developed without needing Council approval. New ships were built, incorporating designs that humans had created but shared freely with the Council. And as humanity grew stronger, the Council's messages became more frequent and more desperate. At first, they were formal. Polite requests for humanity to reconsider. Suggestions for negotiations. Offers of minor concessions. When those were ignored, the messages became more urgent. The Vrex sent ambassadors to the edge of human space, begging for meetings. The Tholians offered trade agreements with favorable terms. The Kelrith sent apologies for their vote. All of them were turned away. The human border became absolute. Automated defense platforms, more advanced than anything the Council had seen, surrounded human space in multiple layers. Any ship that approached without authorization received a single warning, then was escorted out by drones that could outmaneuver and outgun anything in the Council's fleet. Ambassador Nari led one final delegation to the human border. She was not human herself, but a Kelrith who had voted against the probationary status. She had resigned from the Council in protest and spent months trying to arrange this meeting. Her small diplomatic ship approached the border carefully. Almost immediately, 6 human drones appeared, surrounding her vessel with precision. A voice came through her communication system. It was calm and professional, but completely inflexible. This is the Terran Alliance border control. You are entering restricted space. Turn back immediately. Nari activated her own communication system. Please, I need to speak with someone. I need to explain what is happening. The Council is falling apart. Species are dying. We need help. There was a long pause. Then the voice responded. The Galactic Council is not recognized by the Terran Alliance. You have 10 seconds to change course before you are forcibly removed. Nari tried to argue, tried to plead, but the countdown continued. At 0, her ship's engines were remotely disabled. The drones gently but firmly pushed her vessel back across the border and reactivated her engines. Do not return, the voice said. Then the communication cut off. Nari sat in her pilot's chair, staring at the invisible line that marked the human border. Beyond it, humanity was thriving. On her side, the galaxy was beginning to burn. She turned her ship around and began the long journey back to Council space, carrying news that no one wanted to hear. Humanity was not coming back. 2 years had passed since humanity went silent. The galaxy was discovering what that silence meant. The war between the Vrex, Empire, and the Krell Dominion had started small. A disputed mining colony. Some accusations of treaty violations. The kind of tension that normally would have been resolved through negotiation. But Daeun was not there to negotiate. No human mediator sat between the two powers, finding the middle ground and crafting compromises. So the dispute became a skirmish. The skirmish became a battle. The battle became a war. Now, 2 years later, the war had consumed 17 star systems. Billions were dead. Entire planets had been reduced to radioactive wastelands. Both empires were exhausted, their economies collapsing under the weight of endless military production. In the Vrex capital, Emperor Thok Var sat in his throne room, receiving reports from the front lines. Every report was worse than the last. His generals were incompetent, unable to coordinate their forces effectively. His fleet captains made tactical errors that cost thousands of ships. His diplomats failed to secure allies or supplies. Where are the human advisors? He demanded. Bring them here. We need their strategic insight. His chancellor, an old Vrex with faded scales, bowed his head. Your Majesty, the humans are gone. All of them left when we voted for their probationary status. Thok Var slammed his fist against the arm of his throne. Then contact them. Offer them whatever they want. We need them. We have tried, Your Majesty. They do not respond to our messages. Their borders are sealed. The Emperor stared at his chancellor for a long moment. Then he laughed, a bitter sound that echoed through the throne room. We destroyed ourselves. We had the greatest military advisors in the galaxy, and we drove them away because we were too proud to share a mining operation with them. He stood and walked to a massive window that overlooked his capital city. Smoke rose from several districts where Krell saboteurs had struck. His empire was dying, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Far across the galaxy, the Council's defense grid was failing in a different way. The system had been built over centuries, a network of stations, satellites, and automated defenses that protected the core Council worlds. But it had been maintained and upgraded primarily by human engineers. Jinwoo had been one of those engineers. He had spent 15 years working on the defense grid, improving its efficiency and expanding its coverage. Before he left, he had tried to train Council technicians to maintain the system, but they had not taken it seriously. The technology was too complex, they said. They would learn later. Besides, the humans would always be there to fix problems. Now Jinwoo was back on Earth, working on defensive systems for human colonies. And the Council's defense grid was collapsing. Stations went offline without warning. Satellites drifted out of position. Automated defenses fired on friendly ships or failed to engage hostile ones. Council technicians tried desperately to repair the problems, but they did not understand the underlying architecture. Every fix created two new problems. Pirate fleets that had been held back for decades began testing the defenses. They found gaps. They found blind spots. They found entire sectors that were completely undefended. Within months, raids became common throughout Council space. Colonies that had been safe for generations suddenly found themselves under attack. The Council sent emergency requests to Earth. They offered money, resources, and territory if human engineers would return and fix the defense grid. The requests went unanswered. But the worst crisis was medical. The plague of Antares had returned, and it had mutated into something far more deadly. It spread through Tholian populations first, killing hundreds of thousands before anyone realized what was happening. Then it jumped to the Kelrith, then the Vrex, then dozens of other species. Dr. Minji's research had been 98% complete when she left. The remaining 2% would have taken her perhaps 3 more months to finish. But that research was now locked away in human databases, encrypted with quantum keys that could not be broken. Council doctors tried to recreate her work. They had some of her published papers. They had access to the facilities where she had worked. But medicine was not just about equipment and facilities. It was about knowledge, experience, and intuition. Minji had spent 8 years studying the Antares plague. She had run thousands of tests. She had followed hundreds of dead ends before finding the right path. The Council doctors did not have 8 years. They had months before the plague would kill billions. They sent delegations to the human border. They sent messages explaining the crisis. They begged for Minji's research, offering to pay any price. Some messages were desperate. Some were angry. Some tried to appeal to human compassion. None of them worked. In the council chamber, Vothrak stood before an assembly that was far smaller than it had been 2 years ago. Many species had stopped sending representatives. Some because they were dealing with their own crises. Others because they no longer believed the council could help them. "We must discuss our options," Vothrak said. His voice was tired. He looked as though he had aged a decade in 2 years. "The situation is becoming critical across all sectors." A Tholian delegate rose. His crystalline body was dimmer than it should have been, showing signs of the plague. "There is only one option. We must convince humanity to return." "We have tried," Vothrak replied. "They do not respond to our communications." "Then we must offer them more," a Kelrith delegate suggested. "Return their territories. Restore their voting rights. Give them a seat on the Council's executive board." Vothrak shook his head. "We have offered all of that. They are not interested in our offers." A small species called the Pyrin, who had once been close allies with humanity, spoke up. "Perhaps we should apologize. Formally acknowledge our mistakes. Ask for their forgiveness." "We have apologized," Vothrak said quietly. "Many times. They do not acknowledge our apologies." The chamber fell silent. No one wanted to say what everyone was thinking. Humanity was not coming back. Not now. Maybe not ever. A delegate from a minor species stood. She was from a world that humanity had helped develop advanced agriculture. "What if we send our best diplomat? Someone who can truly negotiate with them?" "Ambassador Dayun was our best diplomat," Vothrak said. "And we humiliated him. Who do you think could do better?" The delegates sat down without answering. Another voice spoke up, this one belonging to a Vrex military commander. "Perhaps we should consider a military solution. We could force them to help us." The chamber erupted in shouting. Some delegates agreed. Others called it madness. The argument continued for nearly an hour before Vothrak restored order. "A military solution will not work," he said firmly. We have analyzed human defensive capabilities. They have technology we have never seen. Their border defenses are impenetrable. Any attack would fail. Then what do you suggest? The Vrex commander demanded. Vothrak looked around the chamber, seeing the fear and desperation in every face. I suggest we accept reality. We drove away the species that held this galaxy together. We mocked their contributions. We stole their achievements. We declared them inferior. He paused, his voice heavy with regret. And now we are paying the price for our arrogance. Outside the council chamber, Ambassador Nari watched the proceedings through a live feed. She had returned from the human border months ago, carrying the message that humanity would not speak with them. Since then, she had been trying to find another way. She had studied human history and culture. She had read their philosophy and literature. She had tried to understand what motivated them, what they valued, and what might convince them to help. And she had reached a conclusion that terrified her. Humans were not cruel. They were not vengeful. But they were done. They had given everything to the council, and the council had thrown it back in their faces. Now they were focused on their own survival and their own future. The council's problems were no longer their concern. It was not that humans wanted the council to suffer. They simply did not care anymore. Nari realized that this was worse than anger or hatred. Those emotions could be negotiated with, appealed to, or resolved. But indifference? There was no solution for indifference. She thought about her own species, the Kelrith. They were suffering from the plague. Their economy was collapsing. Their military was scattered and ineffective. And there was nothing she could do to help them. Because the one species that could help had decided they were not worth helping. Nari closed her eyes and tried not to think about how many people would die, because the council had been too proud to treat humans as equals. The galaxy was learning a lesson, but it was learning it far too late. 5 years after humanity left the council, the galaxy was unrecognizable. Fleet Admiral Taiyang stood on the bridge of the Terran flagship Indomitable, reviewing reports from the Border Defense Network. He was younger than most admirals, only 43, but he had risen through the ranks quickly during humanity's expansion. His record was spotless. His tactical thinking was brilliant. And today, he was about to prove just how much humanity had grown in 5 years. Admiral, we have detected a massive fleet approaching the border, his tactical officer reported. Preliminary scans show 200 warships. Mixed council species. Vrex, Tholian, Kelrith, and others. Taiyang nodded calmly. Sound general alert. Bring all border defenses to full readiness. And send a message to Earth Command. They will want to observe this. The fleet that approached the human border was the most powerful armada the Council had ever assembled. It had taken them 3 years to build it, pooling resources from dozens of species. It represented the last of their military strength, the final gamble of a dying civilization. Commander Thelver led the fleet from his flagship, a massive Rex dreadnought called the Eternal Glory. He was a war hero, famous for victories in dozens of campaigns. The Council had chosen him specifically for this mission because they needed someone who could intimidate humanity into negotiations. His orders were clear. Approach the human border. Make a show of force. Demand that humanity send representatives to discuss terms. And if they refused, break through their defenses and force them to the negotiating table. Thelver did not like the plan. He had fought alongside human soldiers during the border wars years ago. He had seen their tactical abilities and their determination. But the Council was desperate, and desperate people made poor decisions. All ships maintain formation, he ordered. We will proceed to the border coordinates and await their response. The fleet moved forward, 200 warships arranged in perfect battle formation. It was an impressive sight, a kind of display that had made entire civilizations surrender without firing a shot. They crossed into the outer detection zone of the human border. Immediately, alarms began sounding on every ship. "Commander, we are being scanned," Felver's tactical officer reported. "Multiple sources. The scanning technology is far more advanced than anything in our database." "Acknowledged," Felver said. "Continue forward." They advanced another 1,000 kilometers. Then the voice came through every communication system in the fleet simultaneously. "This is the Terran Alliance Border Defense Command. You have entered restricted space. Turn back immediately." Felver activated his communication system. "This is Commander Felver of the Galactic Council Defense Force. We request immediate negotiations with Terran Alliance leadership regarding critical matters affecting all species in the galaxy." There was a pause. Then the voice responded, and it was completely unchanged. No emotion, no consideration, just a simple statement of fact. "The Galactic Council is not recognized by the Terran Alliance. You have violated our borders with a military fleet. Turn back immediately, or you will be removed by force." Felver felt a chill run down his spine. The voice was not making threats. It was stating policy, as impersonal as a weather report. He looked at his tactical display. His fleet was massive. 200 of the most powerful warships in Council space. Surely that meant something. Surely the humans would not dare to attack such a force. "Advance," he ordered. "All ships, prepare for possible hostile action." The fleet moved forward again. And then they saw the human defenses for the first time. The space ahead of them lit up with thousands of contacts. Stations, satellites, drones, and platforms materialized on their sensors. They had been there all along, perfectly hidden by stealth technology that the Council could not match. But it was the ships that made Felver's blood run cold. 150 human warships appeared, dropping out of stealth at precise intervals. They were smaller than the Council ships, more compact and efficient in design. But the energy readings coming from them were impossible. Their power generation exceeded Council ships by orders of magnitude, and they were arranged in a formation that Felver recognized immediately. It was a tactical pattern from his own career, one he had used successfully in a battle 15 years ago. A human tactical advisor had helped him design it. They had learned. They had studied. And now they were using Council tactics against the Council. Admiral Tai Yang watched the Council fleet on his display. He felt no anger toward them, no hatred, just a calm professional assessment of the tactical situation. "They are continuing to advance," his tactical officer reported. "Of course they are," Tai Yang said. "They came here to force us into submission. They will not turn back without testing our resolve." He opened a channel to all human ships. "This is Admiral Tai Yang. Prepare to demonstrate Terran Alliance defensive capabilities. Fire warning shots only. Target their shields, not their hulls. We want them to understand our strength, not to kill them." Acknowledgments came back from every ship in his fleet. "Fire," Tai Yang ordered. The battle lasted exactly 12 minutes and 43 seconds. The human weapons were unlike anything the Council had ever faced. Particle beams that cut through shields as if they were not there. Missiles that maneuvered with impossible agility. Energy weapons that seemed to ignore normal physical laws. But Tai Yang had been truthful. The humans were targeting shields and propulsion systems, not life support or crew compartments. They were disabling the Council ships, not destroying them. The Council fleet tried to return fire, but their weapons could not reach the human ships. Every shot was intercepted by point defense systems or simply absorbed by shields that seemed impenetrable. The humans moved with perfect coordination, their ships working together as if controlled by a single mind. Felver watched in horror as his fleet was systematically taken apart. Ships tumbled through space, their engines disabled. Others hung helpless in the void, their shields completely drained. A few tried to retreat, but human drones cut them off, herding them back toward the main group. All ships cease fire. Felver ordered. Retreat. Full retreat. But it was already over. Of his 200 ships, 180 had been disabled. Only 20 still had functional engines, and even those were badly damaged. The human ships stopped firing. They simply held their positions, surrounding the Council fleet in a perfect sphere. Then that calm voice came through the communication system again. You have been granted mercy. Your damaged ships will be repaired enough to return to Council space. You will not be harmed. But if you ever violate Terran Alliance borders again, there will be no mercy. No warnings. And no survivors. Felver sat in his command chair, staring at the view screen. His entire career, all his victories, all his experience meant nothing. The humans had defeated his fleet without even trying. They could have destroyed every ship. They could have killed everyone. But they had chosen mercy, that somehow made it worse. Within hours, automated repair drones emerged from the human defensive network. They attached to the disabled Council ships and began basic repairs. Engines were restored to minimal functionality. Life support was reinforced. Enough to get the ships home, but nothing more. The Council fleet limped away from the human border. Behind them, the human ships returned to stealth, disappearing from sensors as if they had never existed. Back on his flagship, Admiral Tai Yang prepared his report for Earth Command. It would be short and factual. The Council had tested their defenses. The defenses had held. The Council fleet had been sent home with a clear message, but he included one additional note in his report. Recommend continued monitoring of Council space. Their desperation is increasing. This will not be their last attempt. News of the defeat spread through the galaxy within days. Every species heard the same story. The Council's most powerful fleet had been crushed in less than 15 minutes by a human force that had not even used its full strength. Some species were terrified. Humanity had become more powerful than anyone imagined. Others were angry, believing the Council had wasted their last military resources on a foolish mission. And a few began to wonder if perhaps they should seek independent agreements with humanity. On the Council homeworld, riots broke out. Citizens who had watched their quality of life deteriorate for 5 years finally had something to focus their rage on. Why had the Council driven humanity away? Why had they not recognized humanity's worth? Why had they been so arrogant? Counselor Hai Jin watched the riots from her office window. She was human, one of the few who had chosen to remain in Council space when the others left. She had stayed to observe, to document, and to ensure that history remembered what had happened. Now she was finishing her documentary. It was titled, How the Council Fell, A Study in Arrogance. It detailed every mistake the Council had made. Every time they had taken human contributions for granted. Every time they had mocked human emotions or dismissed human concerns. Every time they had stolen credit for human achievements. And it showed the consequences. The wars, the plague, the economic collapse, the defensive failures, and now the military humiliation. Hai Jin uploaded the documentary to every major communication network in the galaxy. Within hours, it was being watched by trillions of beings across hundreds of worlds. The documentary ended with a simple statement that Hai Jin herself delivered to the camera. Humanity did not destroy the Galactic Council. The Council destroyed itself. Humanity was simply the hand that held this civilization together. When you slapped that hand away, everything fell apart. This is not humanity's fault. This is yours. The documentary became the most watched media in galactic history. And everywhere it played, People began asking the same question. How do we fix this? 10 years had passed since Dayan walked out of the council chamber. The galaxy he left behind no longer existed. The council chamber itself was half empty. Of the 847 species that had once been members, fewer than 200 still sent representatives. The others had either collapsed entirely or withdrawn to focus on their own survival. The great civilization that had united the galaxy for thousands of years was dying. Vothrak stood at the council chair for the last time. He was old now. His blue-gray scales faded to almost white. The 4 eyes that had once looked upon the galaxy with pride now held only regret. He had called this final session himself, knowing what he had to do. Members of the Galactic Council, he began. His voice carried through the translation systems to the few delegates who remained. I have led this body for 23 years. I have seen our greatest triumphs and our deepest failures. And now, I must acknowledge the greatest failure of all. He paused, looking around the chamber. Empty seats stretched in every direction. Stations that should have been occupied by dozens of species sat dark and silent. We believed we were strong, Vothrak continued. We believed our unity made us powerful. We believed we were the pinnacle of galactic civilization. And in our pride, we forgot something essential. We forgot gratitude. On a distant human colony world, Dayan watched the broadcast with his family. He was retired now, living a quiet life far from the politics and conflicts of his past. His hair had gone completely gray, and his face showed the peace of a man who had made the right decision and never regretted it. His daughter, now a young woman studying xenosociology, sat beside him. Father, is that the same person who insulted humanity? Yes, Dayan said quietly. That is Vothrak. He looks so different. So old. 10 years can be a long time when you spend them watching everything you built fall apart. On the broadcast, Vothrak was still speaking. Humanity was never the problem. We were the problem. We took their contributions for granted. We mocked their emotions while depending on their compassion. We stole their achievements and claimed them as our own. We declared them inferior while relying on their superiority. He looked directly into the camera, as if speaking to every human watching. We were fools. We were arrogant fools who believed that power came from size and age rather than from contribution and character. And when humanity left, we learned the truth. The council was not held together by our authority or our traditions. It was held together by human mediation, human technology, human medicine, and human dedication. Across the galaxy, billions watched the broadcast, some with satisfaction, others with sadness, all with the knowledge that they were witnessing the end of an era. Therefore, Vothrak said, his voice steady despite the weight of his words, I hereby dissolve the Galactic Council, effective immediately. This body has failed in its purpose. It has failed its members. And it has failed the galaxy. He stepped down from the council chair. Without another word, he walked out of the chamber. The few remaining delegates sat in stunned silence for a moment, then slowly began to leave as well. The broadcast ended. The council chamber went dark, and 3,000 years of galactic government came to an end. Dayan turned off the display. His daughter looked at him with questions in her eyes. Do you think they learned anything? She asked. Dayan considered the question carefully. Some of them did. Ambassador Nari learned. Counselor Haijin learned. And there were others, scattered across the galaxy, who understood what went wrong. But was it worth it? All those people who died. From the plague? All the colonies destroyed in the wars? Was the lesson worth that price? Dayan's expression grew sad. No, the lesson was never worth that price. But the price was paid regardless, because they refused to learn the lesson when it would have been cheap. In human space, life had flourished during those 10 years. The Terran Alliance had expanded to control nearly 300 star systems. Colonies that had been struggling under Council restrictions now thrived. Technology that had been shared freely with the Council was now developed exclusively for human benefit, advancing at rates that amazed even human scientists. Dr. Minji had completed her research on the Antares plague and dozens of other diseases. Human life expectancy had increased by 30 years. Medical technology that the Council had deemed too expensive or unnecessary was now standard in every human hospital. Admiral Young had overseen the construction of the most powerful defensive network in the galaxy. Human space was not just protected, it was impregnable. And the military that defended it was trained, equipped, and organized far beyond anything the old Council could have imagined. Captain Seo commanded a new generation of ships that could traverse the galaxy in weeks rather than months. Human exploration had reached regions of space that the Council had never touched. President Sora had completed her term and retired, replaced by a successor who continued her policies. The human economy was the strongest in the galaxy. The human people were united in a way they had never been under Council membership. And everywhere in human space, people lived with dignity and respect, knowing that their civilization valued them not for their age or their power, but for their contributions and their character. But humanity had not been cruel in their success. When individual species approached the Terran Alliance seeking help, they were heard. When they asked for trade agreements with fair terms, they received them. When they begged for medical assistance, human doctors were sent, though now they were paid properly for their expertise. The difference was respect. Species that approached humanity with humility and genuine need found humans willing to help. Species that approached with demands or expectations of free assistance were turned away. Ambassador Nari had been one of the first to secure a treaty with the Terran Alliance. The Kelworth were dying from the plague, and she had come to the human border not with demands, but with honesty. "We were wrong," she had said simply. "We failed you. We hurt you. And now we are suffering the consequences. I do not ask you to forgive us. I do not ask you to forget. I only ask if there is any way we can earn your help." The humans had listened, and after careful consideration, they had agreed to help. But the cost was high. The Kelworth had to acknowledge their mistakes publicly. They had to implement reforms in how they treated younger species. And they had to pay for the medical assistance in resources and long-term trade agreements. Nari had agreed to every condition, and the Kelworth survived. Other species followed similar paths. Some succeeded in gaining human assistance. Others were turned away because they still believed they deserved help rather than needing to earn it. The galaxy reorganized itself around this new reality. The Terran Alliance became the dominant power, not through conquest, but through simple competence. Species that wanted stability aligned themselves with humanity. Trade flowed through human space. Disputes were resolved by human mediators, though now those mediators charged fees and demanded respect. A new galactic order emerged, one based not on tradition or age, but on mutual benefit and earned respect. It was smaller than the old Council, more efficient, and far more stable. In his home on the colony world, Dayan received a message one day. It was from a group of species asking if he would consider mediating a dispute between them. They offered compensation and promised to respect whatever decision he made. His daughter saw him reading the message. "Will you do it?" Dayan smiled. "Perhaps. It has been a long time since I mediated anything, but I will consider it. Do you miss it? The Council, the politics, all of that?" "Sometimes," Dayan admitted. "But I do not miss the disrespect. I do not miss watching human achievements claimed by others. I do not miss being told that my people were inferior while watching them hold the galaxy together." He closed the message and looked out the window at the colony he now called home. It was a beautiful world, with blue oceans and green continents. Human children played in parks. Human families lived without fear. Human scientists pushed the boundaries of knowledge without restriction. We did the right thing, Dayan said quietly. We walked away when we were not valued. And in doing so, we forced the galaxy to recognize what we had been giving them all along. His daughter nodded. And they paid the ultimate price for their arrogance. Yes, Dayan agreed. But some of them learned. And that is worth something. Across the galaxy, the lesson continued to spread. In classrooms on 100 worlds, young beings learned about the fall of the Galactic Council. They learned about humanity's departure and the consequences that followed. They learned about respect, gratitude, and the dangers of pride got, and they learned that power without appreciation, strength without humility, and civilization without respect would always collapse eventually. Humanity had not destroyed the Galactic Council. Humanity had simply stopped holding it together. And when they let go, the galaxy discovered that everything they had built was resting on human shoulders all along. The Council had paid the ultimate price. But from its ashes, something better was being built. Something more honest. Something more fair. And this time, humanity would not be taken for granted. The silence that had terrified the galaxy 10 years ago was broken now. But on human terms, when humanity spoke, people listened. When humanity offered help, people were grateful. When humanity set boundaries, people respected them. The lesson had been learned, written in the suffering of billions and the collapse of a 3,000-year-old civilization. Humanity had left in silence, and the galaxy would never forget the price of their absence. In the end, that was perhaps the most human thing of all. They had not sought revenge. They had not gloated over the Council's fall. They had simply walked away with dignity and built something better. And the galaxy, slowly and painfully, learned to do the same.